Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Sturry Link Road Project documentary. I hope you've all had a good week. It's certainly been another busy one on site, and for me, another busy week trying to keep up with everything that's happening. With works now taking place across more and more of the project, including areas north of the railway, covering the whole site is becoming a bit of an adventure in itself. There have been plenty of miles walked, a few opportunities grabbed between the weather, and quite a lot to bring you this week. Episode 14, Steel Soil, Storm, really does sum up the last few days. We've seen progress continue across several key work fronts, with one phase of operations making way for the next, while earthworks and ground preparation continue to reshape the landscape. There have also been environmental activities taking place behind the scenes, helping prepare future areas of the scheme for construction. Of course, it wouldn't be a British construction project without the weather getting involved. Some of the heaviest rain we've seen so far has had a noticeable impact on site, creating difficult conditions and temporarily affecting some operations. But, as we'll see throughout the episode, work on a project like this rarely comes to a complete stop, and different parts of the site continue to move forward in different ways. As always, we'll take a look at the latest developments, explain some of the engineering taking place, and follow the progress being made across the project as another important week comes to a close. So, grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's see what's been happening on the Sturry Link Road Project this week. We begin this week's update back at the southern abutment, where sheet piling operations continue to make good progress. The cofferdam itself is now complete, marking another important milestone for this section of the project. With the main installation finished, crews are carrying out the final adjustments and tidying up the remaining sheet piles as preparations continue for the next phase of works. Meanwhile, attention is also turning to areas north of the railway, where a new team has arrived on site to begin installing the perimeter fencing. These works will help define the route of the future Hall Road, which will provide construction access towards the northern roundabout as the project continues to expand across the site. It's another sign of how the scheme is developing, with progress now being made on multiple fronts at the same time. We now move back towards the southern roundabout, where earthworks continue to gather pace. A steady stream of tipper lorries can be seen arriving on site, delivering Type 1 aggregate, which is then carefully spread and compacted using rollers to build up the formation layers. Nearby, more material is being placed around the location of the culvert, installed just a couple of weeks ago. It's quite remarkable how quickly the site changes. What was recently a major piece of infrastructure is now gradually disappearing from view as formation levels continue to rise. Before long, the culvert will be completely buried beneath the future roundabout, quietly carrying water beneath the road for decades to come, while traffic passes overhead with little sign of the engineering hidden below. Tuesday marked another important step in the project as the sheet piling operation relocated from the southern abutment to the central piling platform. The piling rig, along with its supporting equipment and safety barriers, was moved into position ready for the next phase of foundation works. At the same time, preparation of the central platform was already underway. A digger and dumper could be seen excavating and shaping the working area ahead of the construction of the next cofferdam, helping to get everything in place before piling operations begin. Although the work is following on from the southern abutment, this next stage will use a slightly different type of sheet pile. We'll take a closer look at those later in the episode and explain what makes them different. It's another clear sign of the project's progress, with one work area now complete enough for specialist equipment to move on to the next major construction stage. We now head back to the archaeological excavation area, where reinstatement works continue to make good progress. With the archaeological investigations complete, the trench is being carefully backfilled and compacted, gradually returning the ground to its original levels and preparing it for future construction activity. Before this stage could begin, the area was subject to a range of environmental and ecological checks. Along the railway boundary, a camera survey was used to investigate a potential badger outlier set, with no active badger activity identified, helping to ensure that construction can progress while protecting local wildlife. As the archaeology and ecology work draws to a close, another section of the site is being handed back, ready for the next phase of the Sturry Link Road Project. We move along the approach road leading up to the southern abutment from the southern roundabout, where finishing works are now underway. Here, the formation layer is being carefully trimmed and compacted. Trimming is the process of cutting and shaping the surface to the exact design level, removing any high spots and ensuring the ground profile is smooth, consistent, and ready for the next stages of construction. Once trimmed, the material is then rolled and compacted to lock in the finished formation, creating a solid base for the layers that will eventually carry the road structure above. It's one of those final preparation stages that doesn't always stand out on camera, but it's critical in getting the levels and geometry exactly right before moving forward. We head back north of the railway, where the proposed Hall Road corridor is now clearly starting to take shape. Starting low with the drone, we follow the line of the route as it rises through the site. Fence posts are now installed along both sides, defining the full width of the future Hall Road. This section is approximately 350 meters in length, and it's becoming increasingly easy to see the alignment forming as the corridor develops across the ground. A quick glance over the fence brings us back to the archaeological area, where backfilling works have continued in layers, with material placed and compacted to bring the formation levels back up to match the surrounding ground. We then track back down the full length of the Hall Road towards the Shallock Road entrance, walking between the rows of newly installed posts. The density and continuity of the fencing really stands out here, clearly showing how quickly this access route is being defined on site. We move on to the central piling platform, where pre-augering works are now underway ahead of the next phase of sheet piling. The auger rig is being used to drill down into the ground before the piles are installed, helping to form the correct conditions and reduce resistance during driving. On this section, the sheet piles being prepared are of a different specification and are being installed to varying depths as part of the design for this phase of works. As the drilling progresses, material is brought back up from below ground and deposited across the platform surface. This spoil is being carefully managed, with the perimeter protection in place doing its job, including membrane lining and straw bale barriers designed to control and contain runoff at the edge of the working area. It's another key preparatory stage, setting up the ground conditions ready for the next round of piling to begin. We now move to the area between the river and the railway, where ecological works continue alongside the main construction programme. The vegetation management taking place here is part of a carefully planned two-stage process. Initial cuts are kept low and controlled, allowing ecologists to carry out detailed fingertip searches and encourage any reptiles or other wildlife to move safely into neighbouring habitat before further work takes place. The next stage will involve the final vegetation cuts and surface scarification, helping to prepare the area for future construction activities while ensuring the site's ecological commitments are met. It's a good reminder that a project like this involves far more than heavy machinery, with environmental protection playing an important role in the overall construction programme. On the approach leading up to the south abutment, where earthworks continue to shape the future road alignment. Here, crews are carrying out what is known as battering the embankment edges. In simple terms, this involves carefully grading the sides of the earthworks to create a stable engineered slope. Not only does this help blend the new road into the surrounding landscape, but it also improves long-term stability and assists with surface water drainage as the project develops. Alongside the battering works, the ground is being trimmed and compacted, gradually refining the final profile of the approach to the southern abutment and preparing it for the next stages of construction. return once again to the archaeological trench area, where backfilling works are still ongoing into Wednesday. From the outside, it can sometimes look like things are moving slowly here, and I know a few comments have suggested it's just a case of tipping it in and levelling it off up top. But the reality is very different. This is a carefully controlled reinstatement process. The trench is being backfilled in layers of around 150 millimeters at a time. Each layer is then tracked, compacted and worked through before the next is placed on top, repeating the process until the ground is brought back up to the required formation level. Given the depth that was excavated here in the first place, it's a detailed and time-consuming job, but an important one. It ensures the ground is properly reinstated, fully compacted, and ready for whatever comes next on this part of the scheme. So while it might not look dramatic on camera, it's one of those behind-the-scenes stages that has to be done properly to get everything right. Thursday proved to be the most disruptive day of the week, although you might not realize it from these clips. Unfortunately, drone flying and torrential rain don't mix, so it's difficult to fully capture just how wet the conditions became across the site. One unusual sight was the compound packed with vehicles, while the approach up to the southern abutment sat largely quiet. The reason for that is fairly simple. Once formation layers have been prepared, running heavy machinery over saturated ground can do more harm than good, damaging the carefully engineered surface and creating more work to put it right later. To their credit, the Earthworks team stayed on site until around mid-afternoon before conditions eventually got the better of them. But while some activities had to pause, the project as a whole didn't grind to a halt. Pre-booked deliveries still arrived and had to be dealt with, and work continued on the central piling platform where conditions allowed. In fact, when I returned to site on Friday morning, the first steel sheet piles had already been installed, showing that even during one of the toughest weather days we've seen so far, progress on the project was still being made. If you've got a keen eye, you might notice that the sheet piles being installed here on the central piling platform look a little different to those used at the southern abutment earlier in the project. That's because this phase uses GU16N sheet piles, ranging from around 7.5 to 9 meters in length. Unlike the EZ19 sections used previously, these have a U-shaped profile rather than a Z-shaped one. Different sheet pile designs are selected by the engineers to suit the specific requirements of each structure and the ground conditions at that particular location. With the pre-augering complete, the piling operation can now get properly underway, as the first sheets are driven into position to form the next cofferdam. It's another significant milestone for the project, with the same specialist equipment now moving seamlessly from one work area to the next as construction continues to gather pace. The focus at the southern abutment has now shifted to reinstating the piling mat following the completion of the sheet piling and cofferdam works. You can see crews moving, trimming and compacting material to restore the engineered working platform. While it might not be the most eye-catching activity on site, it's an important part of the construction sequence, providing a safe and stable surface for the next phase of foundation works. It's another reminder that on a project like this, there's always work going on, even after the main construction activity has moved on to the next location. I'm standing at what will become one of the project's access roads, leading up into the section between the river and the railway. Before this can be used by construction traffic, there's been a period of site preparation. The area has recently been trimmed following ecological checks, ensuring any required environmental controls were in place before clearance. That's now followed by scarifying the surface, breaking up the top layer to form a suitable working platform for the next phase of works. At ground level, it can look fairly minor, but this is all about getting the area ready for heavy plant and machinery that will eventually be moving through here as the scheme develops. From here, I move across Broad Oak Crossing. On the far side, I head into the field off Shallock Road, passing the abandoned property that sits just off the route. The old house is already surrounded by mature overgrowth, with trees now established in what was once a domestic garden space. This land is understood to fall within the wider compulsory purchase and demolition boundary associated with the road widening and realignment works through this section. Taken together, this stretch shows the early stages of preparation and the changing landscape along the route as the project moves from initial site clearance into its next phases. As we bring episode 14 to a close, these low-level views give a completely different perspective of the project. Flying along the future road alignment, it's becoming easier than ever to imagine what this landscape will look like in years to come. Even our local wildlife seems to be getting used to the changing surroundings, with a few rabbits making a brief appearance along the route. Looking across the southern abutment, it's clear just how much has changed in a relatively short space of time. The earthworks have taken shape, the sheet piling operation has been completed, and the piling mat has now been reinstated, ready for the next major stage of construction. Nearby, the first sheet piles are already standing proud on the central piling platform, marking another important step forward for the bridge foundations. The weather has certainly left its mark on the site this week. You may notice temporary barriers and fencing displaced by the strong winds, a reminder that construction projects have to work with the elements as much as they work with machinery. Despite the challenges, progress has continued across multiple areas of the scheme. Passing over the Ecology area and heading north of the railway, another chapter of the project is beginning to emerge. The Hall Road corridor is now clearly defined, with its new boundary fencing stretching out across the landscape. At the same time, public rights-of-way remain open and well used, with walkers continuing to enjoy the countryside alongside these carefully managed construction works. And this is where we leave the project for another week. Looking out across the route towards the north, it's hard not to feel that the pace of change is accelerating. The southern works are preparing for the arrival of the next major phase of foundation construction, while to the north, the Hall Road is poised to move from lines on the ground to active earthworks. If all goes to plan, the coming week promises to be another significant one for the project, with an impressive 180-ton piling rig expected to arrive at the southern abutment, while bulldozers are penciled in to begin work on the Hall Road north of the railway. Two very different operations, but both marking the next steps in connecting the south and north sides of the scheme. Thank you, as always, for following the journey and for supporting this community documentary. Whether you've been here since the first episode or have only recently joined us, I hope you've enjoyed another week following the progress of the Sturry Link Road Project. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week, and I'll see you in episode 15.